High Court just a few hours ago. Our reporter Erin Bates is there. She was there for that decision. She joins us now live. Erin, we were discussing it offline. Just important to note that these charges have been provisionally withdrawn. And I suppose the question is, how much relief does that bring to Sibiya and Dramat when technically these charges are still in a way hanging over their heads?
Well, certainly from hearing from Sibiya after the decision by that state prosecutor to withdraw the charges, Sibiya saying in a way that, you know, the cloud is lifted, but it's still hanging over him and his till today co-accused Anwa Dramat. And you're right to say that it really doesn't conclude things. It's a sort of retreat by the NPA, but not a direct one. It's kind of half 1 foot in, still possibly prosecuting, half 1 foot out. But certainly there's no doubt that Lesley Maluleke, as he's known, and you'll see in some of the footage from court today that he has his signature cowboy hat on, he's still facing those charges of defeating the ends of justice, contravening aspects of the Immigration Act, and abduction in relation to the rendition or the extradition, if you want to put it in a more familiar word, of these Zimbabwean suspects between late 2010 and early 2011.
So, Erin, just in terms of what comes next for Shadrack Sibiya, for Anwa Dramat, what are their options now?
So there is the possibility that they may consider opening cases of malicious prosecution against the National Prosecuting Authority. What may bring that into some question is the fact that at this point they aren't facing any charges. The charges have been provisionally suspended, so they may well want to wait until this matter of Maluleke is finalized. And we know that he will be back in court on the 12th of November of this year. Michelle, we had a question from one of our viewers asking what were the grounds for withdrawing the charges against both Dramat and Sibiya. And all that we know from the state prosecutor advocate George Baloy in this case is that the state said, based on the representations from counsel for those two accused, the state has decided to provisionally withdraw. That's as far as they've gone. But what I understand is that the arguments from both their counsels was that there simply weren't grounds. There wasn't prima facie evidence to corner both of these individuals over the rendition of those Zimbabwean nationals back in around 2010, 2011.
So provisionally withdrawn by the state against these two Gauteng Hawks bosses and the Hawks head as well. But the top cop in the case, Lesley Maluleke, those charges are still hanging over his head. So why not go ahead and withdraw the charges against him as well?
Well, we're going to have to wait and see. The state prosecutor didn't deliberate or sort of ventilate its reasons. We know why it's been postponed until the beginning of November, Michelle, and that's because there's been a change in counsel for Maluleke recently. And so both the state and his counsel as parties agreed prior to coming into court today that they were both happy to remand the matter until the 12th of November. But, you know, talking about him and his nickname, Cowboy, looking at the history of this case and how it's been managed really does suggest a kind of Wild West, that there were these trumped-up charges on the versions of both Dramat and Sibiya against them for political reasons. And it seems as though there is now a sway in the other direction from the NPA. And Sibiya himself told ENCA this morning that he'd be quite willing to see this case through because he's confident that he can prove he wasn't involved and that this whole matter was cooked up in the kitchen of Richard Mdluli and the likes of Burning and Clemeza. So they hang in the balance, and maybe if they are reinstated, he will get his day in court.
Yeah, and they've both talked about this being just one of the many consequences people like Sibiya, like Dramat, have faced in the pushback against state capture.
Yes, and you and I were speaking earlier about Robert McBride, that he too was embroiled in this incredibly tentacled matter, that his own leadership of IPID came into question because of a report that IPID filed which found that Dramat shouldn't be liable. Interestingly, that the police went to a law firm, and we've heard so much about law firms and reports from law firms being used in these kinds of fights between different factions of law enforcement agencies. A law firm's report found found that both Sibiya and Dramat should be charged, and that was used by Grounds' then Police Minister Nathi Nhleko to push ahead with this matter. And so you get a real sense of the kind of Wild West, as I say, not only for Dramat and Sibiya, but as we've discussed earlier, Robert McBride too. And of course, his suspension was set aside and declared invalid by the Constitutional Court, which really vindicated him and the way he was shunted out of office over this whole rendition matter.
Yeah, certainly a tentacled story, to say the least. Erin Bates doing the best she can to try and unpack the various facets of this story and doing it so well. Live to us there from the North Gauteng High Court.